Hey guys, welcome back to Pillbox Movies. I'm Hank, and today we're going to be watching the 1931 crime drama M. This is a film by director Fritz Lang. Lang is one of the most touted directors of all time. M is about a manhunt for a child serial murderer in the depths of Düsseldorf. I've been wanting to watch this for a long time now, but I've been putting it off for various reasons. The movie has been remade several times, once in America in 1951, directed by Joseph Losey. Isn't Joseph Losey a British director?
I found out later he was an American director who moved to the UK.
Whatever. And actually this year I found out that a remake had been restored by Flicker Alley and by the UCLA Film Noir Foundation, El Vampiro Negro. So yeah, I'm interested to check out both of these, and I figured what a great time to watch the original and the remake. So that's what we're doing now. And before we get started, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. A classic conceit, children's rhymes actually being more nefarious than they would let on. This is something that I've noticed from a couple of the Fritz Lang films that I've seen, is that while I kind of think of some filmmakers of his time as being a bit busier, he actually uses a lot of negative space in comparison to other filmmakers.
50 Mark kannst du den Jörn verbieten, das verdammte Mörderlied zu singen.
Solange man das singen hört, dann weiß man nicht, was noch da ist.
Something I'm just gonna keep an eye out for, that he likes to keep things like wide and expansive. He has an eye for architecture, definitely, and he likes to show his subjects kind of dominated by space. Wer ist der Mörder? Mörder? I love that usage of the shadow.
Du hast aber einen schönen Ball.
And here we have the established theme or motif of the serial killer whistling Hall of the Mountain King. That's so beautiful. Just so disorienting. Repeated use of the staircase to kind of show, I don't know, kind of warpness and also kind of like isolation, loneliness. You're waiting for somebody to cross that threshold and they don't. There's anxiety and anticipation associated with those staircases.
Elsie! Elsie! Elsie!
Yeah, a lot of negative space. Oh, this is that silent film kind of training or experience coming to full effect. Knowing how to construct a kind of feeling, an impression based on images alone. And keeping this character's back to the camera as long as possible, keeping him indecipherable, not knowing his face. And of course the quality present in Metropolis as well. Fritz Lang is a master of displaying crowd scenes.
Jetzt musst du aber schnell nach Hause gehen. Wo wohnst du denn, mein Kind?
Was geht denn das Sie an, wo das Kind wohnt?
Bitte?
Was wollen wir denn von
And here we see Lang using a lot of exaggerated angles to emphasize kind of disproportionate power structures.
Durch eingehendste Vergleiche mit unseren Karteien vielleicht doch noch irgendetwas.
And here we see the kind of elements of the proto-procedural being very specific about each step that's being taken to try and apprehend the criminal, to try and ascertain his identity. We see this kind of procedural element, this diagnostic element in Women in the Window as well.
Ein Ausdruck von Schauspielerei, die nach außen hin die Form der Indolenz.
It's a great introduction of Peter Lorre. Even as we see him, we're not seeing him, we're seeing him in the window, but just like
liegt
What a
ein
presentation.
schwer erweisbarer, aber intensiv fühlbarer Zug von Wahnsinn.
Taschendieb festnehmen. Das können wir, weiter können wir nicht. Fangt doch lieber den Kindermörder.
And at least for what I remember of Metropolis might be like very kind of distinct in the way that he shot it in comparison to those other films. But I think of Metropolis as being very kind of box-like in its structure, and it wants to be very symmetrical and front-facing. And so, as a result, a lot of the shots and compositions that I think of for Metropolis are very kind of square and stated. And this, as with a lot of the other long films that I've seen, is kind of putting you on a diagonal, kind of unbalancing you a little bit. There's like shafts of action and directionality happening in this space.
Die Beamten der Mordkommission kommen nicht mehr aus den Kleidern heraus. Leben beständig auf dem Qui-vive, ständig in der Hochspannung.
Yeah, and see, with the shots of the police force at work, the detectives, it's more kind of square framing to make them seem more inert, like more passive and actionless, at least from my interpretation.
In der äußersten Ecke finden sich noch winzige Splitterchen von Fruchtbonbons und einige Körnchen vom bunten Streuzucker. Wir haben in einem Umkreis von 2 Kilometern, in jeder Konditorei, in jedem kleinsten Kolonialwarengeschäft nach dem Ursprung dieser Tüte geforscht. Umsonst.
That's a beautiful effect.
Mit jedem Tag
Did they just draw that in, or is that utilizing an actual photograph and it double exposing it onto the map?
Sie müssen doch wenigstens wissen, welche Farbe die Mütze von dem kleinen Mädchen hatte, das Sie heute Mittag mit dem Unbekannten gesehen haben wollen.
Natürlich, Herr Kommissar. Die Mütze war rot.
It was blue.
Die Mütze war grün. Die harten Blinden einlassen.
And they're definitely establishing kind of a dichotomy between the manner, the demeanor of the police versus the public. I don't know whether or not they're leaning one way or the other, but the presentation so far is of the police force as being procedural, methodical, trying to be as emotionally distant as possible, and the public being kind of consumed, emotional, and anxious. So I don't know if this film's going to pose this question or if it's going to bring it up later, but perhaps the second act of this film will be a question of which kind of mentality is more helpful or more beneficial in actually capturing the killer. Scarlet Street. Are they doing their job, or are they just checking out a club? God. Just all of this manpower, using it to crack down on the red light district. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if the film is saying this like intentionally, but that these kind of crises also create opportunities. They create like mouthpieces or platforms on which to stand on that, for example, a politician can use to propel their next election, or that the police force can use to kind of exert a strong arm on other criminal elements. And all this manpower being committed to acts that will ultimately not contribute to the capture of this criminal, the criminal that everybody wants to find. I love this framing, this use of negative space. It's great. It's great to kind of show the kind of oppressiveness, the domination of the police force, crowding them all into this hole. It's such a beautiful image. Like, the police are shown as suppressive force. We don't even see their faces. We don't see the faces of the people they're pressing. All of this action is kind of seen at a distance. We only get to hear it, which is like the exact opposite of what I said of him utilizing his silent film techniques. Here we're seeing him use almost entirely oral techniques, but this kind of divorce, this divide. Capturing the emotions of an event without making it be so emotionally disingenuous.
Aber sie vertreiben mir die Kundschaft. Und den sie suchen, den finden sie hier doch nicht. Was glauben Sie, was die hier alle für eine Stinkwut auf den Kerl haben, dem sie jede Nacht die Razzia verdanken?
Yeah, you're definitely getting a sense that if this is an epidemic, it's not going to slowly fade away, that a powder keg is being built up in this, that there's just too much tension happening between the citizenry, the killer, the police force.
Wenn die Bestie unter die Finger kriegten, Brennholz würden sie aus dem machen, kann ich Ihnen sagen.
Yeah. Yeah. This definitely seems like it's going to arrive at a mob rule kind of ending. And the police, to a certain degree, seem powerless. They seem unwilling and ineffectual to stop it. More so even than the procedurals they would influence. I'm surprised at how much of a sociological bent this is taking. It might just be my reading of it, but it feels like it's really carefully observing how a criminal act influences the polity, influences law enforcement, how law enforcement reacts, how it chooses not to react, how it chooses to react in a way that is beneficial to its aims and its priorities, and how that in turn seeds distrust and anxiety further into the public.
Meine Herren, ich eröffne die Sitzung. Der Ordnung halber stelle ich fest, dass sämtliche Führer der Ringorganisationen vertreten sind. Ich nehme an, Sie sind bevollmächtigt, bindende Erklärungen für Ihre Organisationen abzugeben.
Yeah, he's really interested. Long is interested in observing organizations, institutions, and how they deal with these outlier events.
Zustand muss ein Ende nehmen. Wir müssen wieder geordnete Verhältnisse bekommen. So weiß ich nicht mehr, wo wir die Gelder hernehmen sollen, die wir zur Vorbereitung und Ausführung unserer Pläne benötigen.
Yeah, and so as a result, in an almost, I don't know, you might call it efficient. I think it's grossly inefficient. The police aren't able to capture this criminal on their own, and so they lean on the criminal element and kind of deplete their coffers so that in turn they're forced to operate outside of the law in order to capture the criminal. It's very, very like backwards, like sideways thinking. But from the point of view of a police force that doesn't know how to do anything other than what it's been programmed to do, this seems like the most logical way to utilize resources. It's crazy.
Wir müssen ihn fahren. Wir selber.
Müssen wir Auskunft bekommen, die als harmlos entlassen wurden, die ihrer ganzen Veranlagung nach aber mit dem Mörder identisch sein könnten.
Wir müssen die Stadt mit einem Netz von Spitzeln überziehen.
It's cool to see the different systems, their different approaches to finding this criminal kind of reflect their different kind of in-group mentalities or their different organizational preferences. The politicians or the legislators try and lean on other organizations using like operational strength, trying to check with the different hospitals and different asylums. The criminals utilize underground information through informers. The police use brute force. You guys already have an organization. The citizenry have an organization. The organization is the community, the citizens, but they're not like cooperative, or they don't know how to participate with each other.
Hier sind die angeforderten Krankenberichte der in den letzten 5 Jahren als gesund oder harmlos Entlassenen aus den Landes- und Privatirrenanstalten sowie der städtischen Krankenhäuser.
A lot of paperwork for the police. A lot of paperwork. Again, their approach reflects their priorities or their mentality. If they end up capturing him based off of this, that's great. But if police know two things, it's strong-arming the wrong people, and it's paperwork. So long as there's a paper trail evidencing that they tried to do the right thing, then that's the same as doing the right thing. I thought of this later, but the different ways the institutions track Becker down also correlate with different senses, representing each institution's prowess. The inspector tracks him down with visual evidence, paperwork, handwriting samples, and the red pencil he uses in his writing. The beat cops use touch via force and manhandling. The criminals utilize sound based on rumors and an information network through the beggars, and it is a blind beggar who initially identifies Becker based on his whistling. Beckert is also slightly characterized by taste, as he lures children with sweets. Handwriting samples. Oh, wow. I love that use of the reflective surface. Oh, disgusting. I hate how silent it goes for this sequence. You're just sitting in the anxiety with this character. Their disgusting pathology. Nothing to highlight it. Nothing emotional. You just sit and wait with it. You're just gonna have to experience it. There's our DVD cover. It's such a great use of lighting to just have his eyes glow like that from that profile.
Ach, Mutti, ich bin dir entgegengelaufen.
Aber Kind, das sollst du doch nicht. Du weißt doch warum.
I love all these advertisements. I actually wonder. We'll see how it progresses, but there's been kind of a pronouncement of like window shopping, of like window advertisements, and I wonder how that may be presenting an idea and perhaps developing an idea further along as the movie progresses. It's definitely like it's presenting like a point of interest, like it's like a moths to a flame. The children are fixated on the window advertisements. I wonder if the idea will be developed further. Perhaps to a degree, we kind of get an insight into the characterization of M, of this character, that like the children being drawn to the window displays, he similarly is drawn to them. He has perhaps a child mentality as part of his pathology.
Dankeschön.
Using the shadow again. Really great ways of illustrating this character's presence. I've heard that before. Yes. Oh, Jesus. And it's the one actually blind beggar.
Das war doch.
I love these pan outs. It's just so like haunting to see so close up to a character and then the draw so far away from them. They're just left so small, so isolated.
Was hast du denn? Na, hör doch mal, da pfeift doch einer. Hast du den Mann gesehen, der gepfiffen hat? Na ja, ich sehe ihn noch. Heinrich, es spricht ein Kind an. Kleines Mädchen. Er geht mit ihr die Straße entlang. Wir laufen doch nach.
I love the way this movie chooses to dispense information, how little like it shows of acts being committed. It's like Jaws, like when M is committing the act, we're never on him actually doing it, and when he like is approaching doing it or fails to do it, it's like the kind of lead on to the shark attack that we get in Jaws, where it doesn't play the Jaws theme because it doesn't turn out to be an actual shark attack. It's a red herring moment. I don't know if exactly it's like calculated on the part of Long, like if he like purposely chose to depict things in this manner, or if it just eventually solidified after repeat usage. But he's so creative in the way he chooses to depict acts. His hands. The close-up on his hands is so intense. Oh, and the utilization of the close-up on his hands to emphasize the further close-up on Joseph's hands. This emphasis on hands now, 3 different close-ups in 5 minutes.
Haben Sie den entdeckt? Die Bettler haben ihn entdeckt. Ein kleines Mädchen auf der Straße. Aber es steht doch am Pfeifen, hat man...
Oh man, he's about to get destroyed. I actually wonder who's going to enact justice upon him finally, because the members that are closing in on him, whether it be the police or the criminals, like they don't have a specific relationship to him. So while I understand it from a logistical standpoint, it doesn't seem like as emotionally cathartic, because to a certain point, the criminals don't care that he's murdering children. They've never displayed that as their kind of priority. They care about getting rid of him so that the criminal underworld can continue with its operations. Again, we get the motif of the window displays.
Onkel,
Was denn?
du hast dich ja ganz weiß gemacht.
Wo denn?
Da auf der Schulter.
Murderer. Murder.
Was hast du denn?
Komm, wir gehen weg.
Get rid of the kid. Oh, Jesus. This is like so emblematic, I think, of Long, that he manages to shoot a sequence where there's so much tension, and you absolutely don't need to empathize with any one of the individual actors. It's not like you care about the child murderer, but he's being put in such a scene of tension, of rat caught in the middle, of rat being cornered. For me, it feels very much like Long having a scene that has such that feels so visceral, but not having it rely on your audience, on your like empathy as an audience. Is the word getting out? And we repeat a kind of idea that was first constructed earlier in this film of the street being empty and then eventually filling up. We see the individual murderer who will eventually be crowded out by his pursuers.
Die Bettler haben Unterstützung herbeigeholt und das ganze Haus umstellt. Sie behaupten, dass der Kerl sich im Hause versteckt hat.
Ist da noch jemand?
Oh man.
Ihr seid wohl verrückt, was? Die Polizei? Nee, den holen wir uns selber. Ja. Pass mal auf, jetzt ist es... Ne?
6:45. 8?
Also.
It's in an hour and a half?
9, 10, 11.
It's The Godfather. It's the hospital scene. Wow. It's so instructive in comparison to the way that a lot of these kind of procedurals are done now, that there's so much like escalation made of the plot at this point. If there's a chase in a crime movie, here they would have like the chase occur over like 16 different locations that would just constantly escalate and escalate and escalate. And this is like reduced to like 1 or 2 locations, and it's very like it's very spare in its treatment. He escapes to one building, they can't find him, and instead of keep on chasing him, and then he goes to another building and chase and chase and chase, it's waiting. You're just waiting for the right moment to strike. And all this negative space, great use of contrast in this movie between full and empty, between loud and quiet, between the individual and the mass. Just beautiful. I'm not noticing it with the other characters, so I'll check later, but the use of the highlights on M's eyes just constantly keep them glowing, constantly keeping them the point of interest for us as the audience on his face within a frame. It's just like, it's so magnetic and repulsive. It's an overwhelming image. Just how cold-blooded these criminals are, just circling closer and closer in. They're in the right, but it's also like watching this oppressive system, this giant structure closing in and squeezing the life out of an individual. A very, very, very evil individual.
Und da ist der Plan zu ihrer Bedienung. Und wenn die nicht auf die Minute genau
But it's still like the
gestorben
anxiety of like watching like a human being being crushed under like a like an industrial machine or something. There's still like a power imbalance. For any of you who's ever had a mouse in your apartment or your house, this is what it feels like. Oh! Peter Lorre's eyes in this are just such perfection. Long is a master of suspense. Whatever you may say, one way or the other, about intellectualizing his technique or his approach, he's a master of suspense.
Schon oben mit 8 anderen. Jetzt werden sie ihn gleich haben danach. Ich bin bloß nur hier runtergelaufen, um dir zu sagen, was los ist. Wenn ich nicht so aufgepasst hätte, stundenlang hätte man noch suchen können. Der Wächter!
Oh god, it's all coming down now.
314. Nun ist die Polizei im Haus. Das ist doch verrückt, Mensch. Schon ist die Polizei hier. Ran hier, los! Feuert, kommt! Afflicted, was soll das denn?
Like a fucking rat hiding in the corner. Doesn't matter if the light's on, doesn't matter if they are looking directly at you. As long as you don't move, they won't find you. A rat. I love the negative space, the empty spaces that are left in this. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so chilling. All this to capture this man. Is it justified? He's done a horrible crime, yes. Is it justified? I don't know.
Wenn wir den von der Seite packen könnten. So, Mann. Wenn du mir dabei helfen wolltest.
Cops. Since the dawn of time, cops have been cops.
Na, dann werden wir uns den Schwanz mal kommen lassen.
Largest criminal organization on the earth. Hey, we're gonna charge you for a crime you didn't commit, so that you'll narc on your pals.
Hier, Mann, hoch. Beihilfe zum Mord. Das ist eine hässliche Sache, Franz.
Herr Kommissar, da meinen wir mit. Damit will ich nichts zu tun haben. Ich sag jetzt alles.
I think it's really interesting. I'll talk about this later, but I think that it's really, really, really interesting that this movie about a child murder is almost entirely uninterested in the child murder aspect of this. Really, the very particular kind of interests and peculiarities of Long, I'd say. Like, it's so weird to watch this in contrast with Murnau. I think we have a Murnau movie up on this channel, The Hands of Orlok. Murnau is so obsessed with psychology, with character. The entire movie is shaped towards the one performance and physiological, psychological state of its protagonist, played by played by Conrad Veidt. And here, like, Long is having none of it. Long wants to see how institutions, how communities, how organizations respond to this kind of antagonistic stimulus. A child murderer isn't seen as like as a child murderer. It's seen as an act, like an attack on a cell community, and this is how the cell community, how the cell responds to that attack. I'd say, if anything, this movie is interested in power disparities. I don't know what it has to say about it necessarily, but it's a movie that with a presentation full of power disparities of all different types, positively and negatively. Power disparities. The entire community is there. Women are there too. They're all there for him. They're all there to see him hang.
Hilfe! Hilfe! Lasst mich raus! Lasst mich raus!
Aber meine Herren, ich bitte Sie, ich weiß gar nicht, was Sie von mir wollen.
Nein, nein. Kein Irrtum.
That's a beautiful
Elsie,
shot.
Elsie. Nein! Nein! Nein!
Die auch nicht, was? Und die? Und die
I hate that it's all little girls. Oh my god. Look at his face. So is this gonna go the full Peter Greenaway? Is it gonna go the full Darren Aronofsky mother, or are they gonna tear him apart?
Verteidiger! Verteidiger! Ich brauche keinen Verteidiger! Wer will mich denn anklagen? Ihr vielleicht! Ihr!
Ihr vielleicht! Ihr!
Sie. Wer sind denn Sie schon wieder?
Your defense.
Ich habe das zweifelhafte Vergnügen, hier als Ihr Verteidiger zu fungieren.
Habe ich denn nicht dieses Verfluchte in mir? Immer muss ich durch Straßen gehen und immer spüre ich, da ist einer hinter mir her. Das bin ich selber.
A dark passenger, if you will.
Verfolgt mich.
Hilfe! Ich kann nicht! Ich kann nicht!
Ich kann nicht.
I mean, if his crimes were so impulse-driven, if he can't help himself, he shows remarkable lucidity in covering up his crimes.
Das heißt also, dass morden muss. Und damit hat sich selber sein Todesurteil gesprochen. Dieser Mensch muss ausgerottet werden. Dieser Mensch muss weg.
I agree, but the way this movie is framing it makes me think we should question it just a little. Because he's not prescient when or he's not cognizant entirely of his actions. No, that's not what he's saying.
Und einen kranken Menschen übergibt man nicht dem Henker, den übergibt man dem Arzt.
Wieder monatelange Hetzjagd. Wieder Paragraph 51, wieder Irrenhaus, wieder ausbrechen oder entlassen werden und wieder morden müssen. Und das geht ja nicht in alle Ewigkeit so weiter?
Einen Menschen zu töten, der für seine Taten nicht verantwortlich zu machen ist, dazu hat niemand das Recht. Auch nicht der Staat.
I'm really surprised by the anti-capital punishment stance this movie is taking at the end. I really wasn't expecting this movie to be so.
Aber wissen Sie, wie das ist, wenn einem so ein Kindchen
granular in its analysis of this kind of act. So many movies after M will treat the topic of murder, the topic of child endangerment, of mob rule, mob mentality in such reductionist terms comparatively. This is like really observing every last detail and analyzing it, whether or not there is like moral certainty in any act.
Dass diesen Menschen, ist ja kein Mensch, dass diesen Menschen der Schutz des Gesetzes zuteil wird, auf den auch der Verbrecher Anspruch hat. Darauf beten wir! Ich verlange, dass dieser Mann der Polizei übergeben wird. Ausgerechnet Polizei! Schluss mit dem Kerl!
Yeah, like, there is no moral certainty in this world. There's just power structures, one power overwhelming another power. It's a real kind of presentation of might makes right. I'm really surprised that the movie makes me kind of side with the child murderer, at least saying that he warrants, like, fair trial, and perhaps that the capital punishment is not justified in his case. Something that I, subscribe to in real life, but in movie terms, I think like movies are just like not coherent or not. They're not real life. They can't like parse that kind of subtlety in movie form, but this film tries to.
Man muss ihm noch besser auf die Kinder Acht geben. Ihr.
Wow. That's such a weird movie. It's such an impactful ending. Yeah, and the ending, that's such a powerful ending. It's just like, oh my gosh, making it about the victims again. And really, like, what the last half of this movie is about, or the last third of this movie is about retributive justice, and perhaps what the ending is tying into is a question of preventative measures. That this film is so, the characters in this film, I'll say, in the last half are so obsessed with retribution, with a blood debt, that there's no justice to their actions, and their actions will do nothing to restore the lives of the children who were murdered by by Hans Beckert. I forgot. But the movie is quite observant, actually. It's not an emotional movie. It's about an emotional subject, and it shows characters' kind of emotional state in a non-judgmental way. But overall, it's a movie that is trying to be impartial about these things, or trying to be as humanist as possible. I'm really surprised that they took that Long took a story of a child murderer and chose to utilize it as a springboard for analyzing retributive justice, analyzing power structures, and I don't know, like how inequalities of power like dehumanize and brutalize in any form. Yeah, and this was made in the midst of conversations in the Weimar era about capital punishment and about psychiatry and about the emotional state of like pathologic killers. It's crazy that it presents this from the perspective of, or on the subject of a child murderer, because I want to make it plain, like, the movie does not try and elicit sympathy to you towards Beckert at all. Like, it perhaps in the last part like tries to get you to understand his psychology. I push back against that personally, because he's in a frenzied state. He's in a court filled with criminals who want him dead. Under these conditions, I find it very plausible that Beckert would be lying in order to try and preserve his life. Like, there's no need for him to have an emotional outpour, and for his emotional outpour to be sincere. I get that in cinematic language, that's usually what happens at the end of the film, but we're dealing with a character that is not constructed out of the normal components of a Hollywood film or a popular film, and his circumstances aren't those that would necessarily tip him to being truthful in the end, even though kind of narratively we would expect him to be honest in this last exclamation. So this movie is not The Woodsman. This movie is not trying to present a sympathetic portrayal of a monster or a terrible human being. This movie is interested in social systems and institutions and hierarchies of power. The children are the most powerless individuals within the system. They're the ones that are most easily brutalized. They're the most vulnerable. They don't have the protection of anybody except for their parents. Their parents don't have a community to live in. The parents individually care for the children and don't have the proper network to communicate with each other, to care for the children, to keep them safe. The children are brutalized by this killer. This killer is brutalized by this crime organization, and this crime organization is brutalized by this law enforcement and by this government. And at the end of those power systems, all we see is retributive justice. All we see is forces being enacted to lash out or retaliate against actions done against the governing body. And what the statement of the mothers is at the end, which is anti-death penalty, which is anti-hierarchical, is that with these systems in place, nothing is done to prevent these crimes, that you only capture the man, you don't stop the act. It's a social services movie that none of these institutions, despite their vast power, their vast overreach, put things in place to help these children, to help this psychotic, to help these criminals. All the systems of power are made to abuse them, to punish them after they've done something wrong. It's a really, really humanistic look at and very kind of egalitarian look at how this society functions, on how its criminal element functions, how its governmental entities function. And while Beckert is not portrayed as a character deserving of sympathy, he's not portrayed in any positive light. He's also in the way that the criminal organization chases them down and brutalizes them. The way he's displayed as being pathological in his desire to commit murder, he is shown to be undeserving of the death penalty. That the death penalty is not addressing any of root concerns or causes, that it is not helping the victims, that it is not preventing the crimes, that it is not treating him as a human in the same way that the criminals would want to be treated in the presence of the judicial system. They, as a kangaroo court, should not dispense mob justice, the death penalty, onto this human being if they don't want the death penalty dispensed on them for committing the exact same crimes. The leader of the criminal organization, who is presiding over the trial, he's responsible for crimes of the same magnitude as Beckert. He has also killed 3 people, but because those are termed manslaughter, because those were adults, because he didn't do it out of a certain pathology, because a degree of intentionality can't be ascribed to him, they're treated different. They're within a different system. They're within the in-group system of criminality, where those kind of murders are justified, and Peter Lorre's character, Beckert's character's murders are unjustified. And like I said in the beginning, earlier, that these institutions aren't guided by morality, they're guided by a collective consensus of in-group and out-group. So what they decide as being good or bad or evil or reprehensible or moral or virtuous are based on the collective actions of the in-group and based on ostracizing the out-group. So based on those definitions, the manslaughters that Schranker committed aren't comparable, but they're the same loss of human life. So it's a very complex movie. I'm really surprised that this is a movie that's liked by so many people or praised by so many people, because it's like a really, really intelligent film. And while people are capable of liking intelligent films, I don't usually see them like celebrating so very, very pointedly intelligent films. Like, this takes the kind of social commentary of Metropolis and blows it out of the water, in my opinion. In my opinion, the end of Metropolis is like, oh man, the heart and the mind, they have them meet together. And like, I get that there's also the reading of like, you know, proletariats cooperating with capitalists or whatever, and just like, Metropolis is a very intelligent film with very intelligent things to say about its times and about its systems of power. But I actually think that M is even more discerning and calculated and observational about the systems of power present in crime, in policing, in the police state, in government, in the judicial system, in retributive justice, in the death penalty, in preventative measures, in like public services and public works. It's, oh my god, I'm like shocked at how much this film is observed. I really thought it would just be a procedural drama where there's a good guy and there's a bad guy, and it casts so many moral grays on the good guys in this movie, on the people who are chasing, and against the starkest black of the bad guy being a child murderer. It makes you see shades of gray. It's crazy. What a crazy movie for people to like. This is going over everybody's head, right? Do people talk about this when they talk about this movie? I don't know. This is a point where I'm like, I need to read up on the discourse on this, because I don't hear anything about these questions being asked when hearing about this movie. This movie is a lot more sophisticated than people make it out to be. It is not just a really well shot movie about a child murderer getting his comeuppance. This is not a Greek tragedy. This is not a cathartic movie for an audience. This is a socially observant movie. Very penetrative, very interrogatory, questioning all sorts, all kinds of systems. It's a brilliant film. Wow. Maybe you've seen M. Rewatch M. Rewatch M. Let me know what you think, because this was made in a powder keg of kind of social changes, social reforms going on in Germany in the 1930s, over undergoing transformations under the Weimar Republic. There's a lot of systems and institutions being questioned within the making of this movie. And I would recommend you watch it, or you watch it again and see it from that lens. Yeah, that was M. Astoundingly good. Really worth a rewatch. Very, very complex movie. Very layered. Yeah, let me know what you think of M. And in the meantime, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. And until next time, keep watching good movies.